the father's true intent too. As they reached the midpoint, Candy felt something brushed against her legs. She grasped, her eyes widening in terror. Jerry looked down, her expression grim. "It's just a fish," she assured her daughter, though her eyes searched the murky water lily. "We're almost there." The water grew shallower, and they stumbled onto the opposite bank, their legs numb from the cold. They climbed out of the river, their clothes clinging to their bodies like a second skin. The chill in the air beat at their wet skin, but they didn't dare stop to rest. The drumbeat had faded into the distance, but the memory of them was a constant reminder of the danger lurking behind. They moved through the night, guided by the moon's intermittent glow and the distant glimmer of fireflies. The sounds of the forest grew louder as the village noises receded. The croaks of frogs and the whispers of the wind in the trees, their only companions. Candy's eyes darted to every shadow. Her imagination conjured up Jabari's face in everyone. Finally, as the first light of dawn began to break the horizon, they stumbled upon a small abandoned hut. It was nothing more than a few wooden planks held together by hope and time, but it offered a semblance of shelter. Jerry collapsed against the wall, her chest heaving with exhaustion. "We'll rest here," she said, her voice barely a whisper. Candy nodded, her own energy spent. They pushed aside the debris that had gathered at the doorway and stepped inside. The musty scent of disuse filled the air, but it was better than the cold embrace of the night. They huddled together on the dirt floor, sharing what little warmth their bodies could offer. Jerry pulled out a piece of cloth and began to dry Candy's hair. Her eyes filled with a mix of sadness and determination. "I'm sorry," she murmured. "I never wanted you to know the truth about him." Candy leaned into her mother's touch, her own eyes brimming with unshed tears. "It's not your fault, Mama. He's the one who's done all this." Jerry nodded, her expression hardening. "You're right, my daughter. And now we must be the ones to set things right." She paused, her gaze drifting to the door, as if expecting Jabari to appear at any moment. "But we can't do it alone. We need help." Candy's thoughts raced. Who could they turn to? The village elders were the only ones who knew the extent of Jabari's deceit, but they had been cautious, perhaps too cautious. Then it hit her. "Mama, what about Uncle Wangi? He's always been kind to us, and he's wise like the elders." Jerry's eyes lit up with hope. "Yes, Candy. He will know what to do. We'll go to him tomorrow. For now, we must rest and gather our strength." She pulled a tattered blanket over them both, and together they lay in the dust, silence of the abandoned hut. The warmth of their bodies stark contrast to the cold floor beneath. The night was filled with fitful sleep, their dreams haunted by the specter of Jabari's rat. But with the first light of dawn, Jerry stared, her eyes filled with renewed purpose. "We must leave before he finds us," she whispers. They set off again, their journey made more urgent by the knowledge that Jabari would not rest until he has found them. The path grew more treacherous as the sun climbed high, the heat beating down on them like a drum. Candy's legs itched and her stomach rumbled with hunger, but she pushed on, driven by fear and promise of safety. The landscape began to change, the lush vegetations of the riverbank giving way to the barren savanna. The only shade came from the occasional acacia tree, casting spots of relief on the sun-scorched earth. Jerry's eyes searched the horizon, looking for any sign of a village where Uncle Mwangi lived. As the sun reached its peak, they stumbled upon a small grove of mango trees, their branches laden with ripe fruit. Jerry's face broke into a smile. The first one Candy had seen in days. By getting closer, she said, plucking a mango and peeling it with practiced ease. They sat under the tree, sharing the sweet, juicy fruit, letting the sticky sweetness revive their spirit. The rest of the day passed in a blur of walking and talking, their footsteps carrying them closer to Uncle Mwangi's village. Candy spoke of her dreams for the future, a place where she and her mother could live without fear. And Njeri listened with a quiet intensity that made her feel heard. The horizon grew hazy with the promise of a new day, and as the sun dipped below the line of the earth, they saw the distant flickers of fires that signaled civilization. The arrival was met with surprise and concern by the villagers. Word had spread of their disappearance, and the whispers of Jabari's pursuit had reached even the ear. Uncle Mwangi, the tall, stopped man with a wise gaze, took them in without question. He listened to their story, his expression growing grimmer with every word. "You must act quickly," he said, his voice low and firm. "The sun does not shine long, as those who harbor serpents in their homes." The next day, Uncle Mwangi gathered a group of trusted men, and together they set out to Mbegu. The journey was fraught with tension, each step bringing them closer to the danger they had left behind. Candy clung to her mother's hand, her heart pounding in her chest. She had never seen the gentle faces of her village in such a state of anger and determination. As they approached the village, they saw a cloud of dust rising in the distance. The drum beats grew louder, the rhythm chaotic and frenzied. Fear gripped Candy's heart as she realized that Jabari had not only discovered their flight, but had rallied his own band of followers to track them down. Jerry's eyes were filled with a mix of terror and resolve as she tightened her nod on Candy. "Mama, what do we do?" Candy whispered, her voice barely audible over the din. Jerry looked at her daughter, her eyes a storm of emotions. "We face him," she said, her voice firm. "We cannot run forever." The group of men from Uncle Mwangi's village fanned out, forming a protective circle around them as they approached the chaos. The village of Mbegu were in frenzy, their cries of anger and fears rising to meet them. At the center of it all, Jabari stood, his eyes wild and his face twisted in a snarl. He had a machete, a metal glitching in the sun. Candy's knees trembled as she recognized the faces of her friends and neighbors, now twisted by Jabari's influence. They shouted accusation at her and her mother. Their eyes glazed over. It was as if the man they had once loved and respected had been replaced by a monster. The elders of Mbegu stepped forward, their heads bowed in shame. One of them, Nzi Kiongo, spoke up with his voice strongly and steady. "We have been blind, Jabari. Your deceit has gone too far. The village will no longer stand by your darkness." Jabari's eyes narrowed and he spat on the ground. "You dare to challenge me?" he roared. The crowd of villagers parting like the Red Sea before Moses. "I have brought prosperity to this land, and for that, to be called a monster by a girl who knows nothing of the world?" Uncle Mwangi stepped forward, his staff thumping against the arch with each step. You've brought us fear and suspicion. The ancestors will not stand for this. Jabari sneered, raising the machete. You think your ancestors can save you from me? He took a menacing step closer. But Njeri stepped in front of Kendi, her body rigid with defiance. Nzikiongo raised a hand, and the villagers grew quiet. We do not seek to fight you, Jabari, but we will not let you harm our people any longer. Jabari's laugh was cold and mirthless. You think you can stand against me? He gestured to the villagers behind him. Their eyes glazed with fear and loyalty. Look around you. They are with me. They know the power I wield. Kendi felt the anger bubbling up inside her. They are only with you because you've lied to them, she shouted, her voice carrying over the hushed whispers of the crowd. They don't know the truth about you. You are not a hero, you are a fraud and a monster. Jabari's smile vanished, and his eyes flashed with rage. He took a step toward her, the machete glittering in the sun. But before he could reach her, a figure emerged from the crowd. It was the village healer, Mama Ndoto, her eyes blazing with a fierce determination that buried her frail flame. The truth is here, she declared, holding up a bundle of herbs. These are the same ones you've been using to control us. The same ones you stole from my hut. Your witchcraft ends now. The villagers grasped, and the air grew thick with the weight of accusation. Jabari's eyes darted around, searching for an escape, but the cycle had closed in around him. The fear that had once held them in his thrall began to dissipate, replacing by anger and betrayal. You, he spat on Mama Doto. His hands tightened around the machete. You've always been a meddling old woman. Mama Doto's gaze never wavered. It is not I who has brought darkness to this village, she said, her voice steady. It is you, Jabari, with your deceit and your greed. The air was electric with tension, and Kendi could feel the power of the truth stirring to break through the chains of fear that had bound the villagers for so long. Njeri took a step forward, her voice shaking but firm. Jabari, we know you are not what you seem. You have no place here. Jabari's hand clenched around the machete, his knuckles white with rage. You dare to defy me, the beloved. His eyes flicked from one face to the next, searching for the hint of loyalty, but the villagers had turned against him, their eyes now clear of his influence. Mwangi stepped closer, his staff raised. You have no power here, he said calmly. The spirits of our ancestors are with us. They will not let you harm us. Jabari's eyes darted around the cycle, his breath coming in short, sharp gasps. The anger in his eyes turned to desperation as he realized the tide had turned. The villagers who had once followed him now stood firm among him, against him, their faces urged with accusation. With a snarl, he lunged at Mama Ndoto, the machete sliding through the air. But Kendi was faster. She threw herself between the healer and Jabari, her body a human shield. The blade arched down, and for a moment, time seemed to stand still. Then, with a thud, it embedded itself in the earth beside her, the force of the blow vibrating through her bones. Jabari's eyes went wide with shock as the villagers closed in, their own fear now replaced by anger. "You can't do this to me," he screamed, his voice cracking with panic. Mwangi's voice was firm, like the trunk of an ancient baobab tree. "We are not the ones with power, Jabari. The ancestors have shown us the truth. It is they who reject you." Jabari's eyes searched the circle of villagers, the fire in his gaze dimming as reality set in. He took a step back, his hands trembling on the machete's handle. This isn't over, he spat, but the threat held no weight. His shoulders slumped, and he knew he had lost. The villagers stepped closer, their fear mopping into righteous anger. "Leave!" Nzikiongo ordered, his voice like the final crack of the whip. "Leave and never return." Jabari's shoulders slumped, his eyes darting around the circle as if seeking a way out. With a smell of defeat, he turned and disappeared into the surrounding bushes, the machete still in his hand. The tension drew from the air like water from the punctured gourd, leaving the villagers to stare at one another in shocked silence. Mama Ndonto stepped forward, her eyes glowing with a fierce light. "We must purify the village," she said, her voice commanding. "The ancestors have shown us the truth, but the stain of his magic remains." The villagers nodded in agreement, and together they set to work. They gathered the stolen herbs and performed a cleansing ceremony, their voices rising in song as they called upon the ancestors to protect and guide them. The air grew thicker with the scent of burning sage and frankincense, the smoke pouring upward like prayers to the heavens. Kendi watched her heart swelling with pride and relief. The nightmare was over, and she had played her part in saving her mother and her village. Njeri stood beside her, her eyes shining with a newfound strength, her hand gripping Kendi's tightly. The day that followed were a blur of healing and rebuilding. The villagers worked together, repairing the damage Jabari had caused. The stolen herbs were returned to Mama Ndonto, and the whispers of witchcraft were replaced by the murmurs of unity and hope. The elders spoke in hushed tones about the power of the ancestors and the importance of vigilance. Njeri and Kendi moved in with Uncle Mwangi and his family, their own huts a symbol of the fear they had left behind. Each night as the village felt quiet, Njeri would sit with Kendi, her eyes filled with the weight of her own revelation. "I should have seen it sooner," she said, her voice heavy with regret. "I was so desperate for a better life, I ignored the signs." Kendi took her mother's hand, feeling the calluses from the years of hard work. "It's not your fault," she said, her voice firm. "We are safe now, and we can start all over again." That is the end of the story. Kendi was a wise and observant child. Train your children to be wise. Things you can't see, they can see, and they will be of great help. I hope you enjoyed the story. I hope you learned from it. I would love to see your comments and more points from the story in the comment section. Thanks for being part of the channel. Please, I'll appreciate your subscription. Thanks for those who have been subscribing. I really appreciate it. Bye. Catch you.